Let's discuss the tuple class in Python. The tuple class provides an immutable sequence of elements similar to the list class, which provided a mutable sequence of elements. As a result, it will have fewer methods as it has no methods available to actually change an existing tuple. On my screen, I have a Python shell on the left side, which I'll use to run my program, which I have my program on the right side of my screen called tuple_demo.py. If I go Run Menu, Run Module, it'll execute the program so we can see how these things work. First of all, we have a Tuple Function, which acts as a constructor to create an empty tuple by default. We can see the empty tuple, when printed, shows up as a pair of empty parentheses. That same tuple constructor function can be used to convert things like sequences of characters in a string into individual elements in a tuple. You can see if the tuple function is applied to the string hello, then each individual string that made up the larger string becomes an element within the tuple. You could also use that tuple function to do things like convert a list into a tuple. In this case, I have two lists really, a outer list, which contains a inner list. Using the tuple function only converts the outer list into a tuple. You can see that the inner list is just an element within that tuple. Just like the empty tuple appeared when printed, you can use that same syntax to create an empty tuple. Just assign a variable equal to a pair of empty parentheses. It'll look the same as the tuple that was created with a tuple function. It's kind of tricky at times to create a tuple with one element, because if you just did an element inside of parentheses, it would just be using the parentheses to evaluate that object. You need to use the parentheses, the element, and a comma so that you have one single element in a tuple, which we'd call a singleton. And you can see that it will print the same way that you create it. The basic tuple syntax is just to use the parentheses around a comma-separated list of different objects. In this case, those objects are simply integers and strings, although they could be any objects at all, like other lists, tuples, dictionaries, bytes, bytes arrays, etc. There's only a few things that you can do with tuples because they're immutable. You could test for membership with the in operator. If that element is a member of that tuple, then this will return true. And as A is in tuple sin, you can see that it does return true. You could also use not in to test for non-membership. Since 1 is not in tuple sin, it's not a member, that returns true as well. Looking at that tuple string again, we see once more that it is the individual strings that make up the word hello. We could apply the min function to find the smallest element, in this case the one closest to the beginning of the alphabet. Or we could apply the max function to find the largest element, in this case the O, which is closest to the end of the alphabet. There is no sort method or reverse method for a tuple like there was for a list, but you can apply the sorted function to a tuple if you wanted a sequence that was in a specific order. However, that sequence will be a list sequence and not actually a tuple. A couple other methods that are available for the tuple are count and index. Count will let you know how many times a particular element appears, and index will let you know at what index position. In this case, that string hello, or the individual strings that make it up, appears just with the O one time. You can see the index position is 4. Once again, I'd remind you that Python uses zero-based indexing, so we'd count from the beginning 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 until we got the index position of that element. And finally, you can apply the length function to a tuple to find out the total number of elements that are present within that object. We'll see more about tuples in the upcoming demonstration on how slicing works in Python. For now, that's a good introduction to how tuples work within Python.